On my channel for some time now, I have been doing Mangs Rebalance patch for FE7. This was made hopefully to fix some of FE7's issues. He even went to Lyn Hard Mode and Hard Mode to give hard mode bonuses to the enemies. Other improvements include upgrading 2x weapon effectiveness to 3x, as it was already in the Japanese version. He had also added more promotion items and buffed the bases to several characters. However, in this video we will strictly be discussing the Lyn Hard Mode part of the game now that that part of my run has actually went up onto YouTube, and can be watched should you wish to. I will go through each map that you play in order, where I discuss what each map is like, how it's been changed, and what the pros and cons are of said changes. Then I will deliver my overall verdict on the map, whether it has become better or worse. So to start off with, we have the Prologue, which is about the same as vanilla, bar having just a few extra enemies. These enemies are scattered further out, so while you only have Lyn, as long as you're diligent, you should have no problems on this map. Not to mention, there are terrain tiles to help you, and now Lyn also has more vulneraries. You're also now given a slim sword as well as your usual iron sword. The slim sword has more crit now, however it is still weaker than any other weapon type. I can't say I find it particularly useful on Lyn since she usually has plenty of accuracy and does usually get a little bit of crit. However, of course, as often memed, her real issue is not being able to hit hard enough. The only way you can really lose this map is just being careless. So in retrospect, the improvements to this map are just 2 more brigands. And you know what? That's perfectly okay. You are given the tools that you need. Honestly, I'm fine with this improvement. Is it necessary? Not really. On the other hand, Lyn gets more of a head start and will probably get another level she wouldn't otherwise. So honestly, I'd have to say this is a good redesign. So now, the real Chapter 1. Here's also where the patch shows what it's really about. As per usual, you get Sane and Kent, except now their differences are more pronounced in their bases. Sane is stronger and Kent is faster. Kent is going to be doubling a fair bit at base in fact, which is good news for Kent fans. This also gives him more Void, which you'd think is pointless, but as you'll soon see a little bit into this map, that Void actually will be pretty important. So there are brigands as usual, but there's also now Merc. Now the Merc isn't too bad, just don't expect you'll be doubling him. Be mindful of weapons though, as Mangs has changed their weapons up. One brigand actually has a halberd. Yes, you heard me right, a halberd. On Chapter 1. And it does have enough to one-shot Sane and Kent at base, so be wary of that. However, if you remember Kent's extra avoid, you can bait him with Kent onto a forest tile, and the brigand's hit rate should be in the single digits, assuming Kent has a sword equipped. Alternatively, if you can afford to pull with Lyn, she's probably the safer option, ironically, since she actually doesn't take effective damage from him. Besides that guy, the boss now moved. This, on my first try that I didn't upload, actually forced me to reset as he got Kent trapped and killed. I get why Mangs made more bosses aggro, but I don't think it's a good change, and some may very well disagree with me on this. But the issue I have is just, my brain is not wired to expect enemy bosses to move until you get within their range, with very few obvious exceptions, like where it's just so obvious the boss is going to move, you know. By itself, it's honestly a fine design choice, but by player habit, I don't think it's a good change. So really, it's not so much that I think it's a dumb choice, it's more just like a, you know, muscle memory, or I guess, I don't know what the equivalent to that would be for your mind, just memory, I don't know. But anyway, the point is just like, you're just so used to bosses not moving, so it's kind of annoying to have them now move. I get why he did it, of course, but I would overall say I'm not a fan of that particular change. Overall, this map is pretty alright, and I think the diversity of weapons is actually a pretty cool choice, but I do think it's a little bit early for effective weapons to be present, like the halberd. I think it's a little bit too soon, because you're only in Chapter 1 and you only have 3 units that can attack him, 2 of which pretty much just die in an instant if they get a little bit lucky. Of course, as I said before, I'm not really a fan of moving bosses. However, on the other hand, Sane and Kent's buffs are great, and they feel more unique. You know, like, Sane was the stronger cav, so was Kent the faster cav, but now they're more pronounced in those fields. So instead of just them having, like, 1 extra strength or 1 extra speed compared to the other, they're now, you know, like 3 or 4 points higher than the other. So, and like I said, Kent actually doubles at base, so you do notice that change a lot more, that difference. You notice that difference a lot sooner than you otherwise would. And the thing is, since their bases are improved to that point, they're more likely to stay on that track, and I like that. Onward to Chapter 2. So this map kind of continues Chapter 1's trend of giving enemies better weapons a little bit too early on. Much more weapon diversity is in this map. A hand axe, just kind of annoying right now because you have no 1-2 range of your own. A steel axe, which is not particularly scary, especially with the sword equipped. Another halberd, which, I mean, we've already been over that in the last chapter, you know what that does. And a sword reaver, which is particularly bad news for Lyn. However, Saint and Kent do have lances to, you know, avoid getting caught by the sword reaver. The scariest part probably is the throne boss Mercenary, who, while he doesn't actually move, he does have a longsword, which, pretty much like the halberd, can just murder Saint and Kent right there. Meaning you're reduced to having to only really use Lyn for this boss. If your Lyn hasn't been that good with strength or something, well, tough luck. I make this map sound scary, but it's actually more fun than scary. You just can't autopilot. You have to keep your eyes peeled and pay attention. As I said before, I do think it's a little early for all these weapons, but the terrain here is your friend, and it will help you. However, I would take away the boss's longsword, unless you took him off the throne. Like, either or, I wouldn't keep both. I think it's a little excessive for the boss to have both. I just think it's way too much to make your only viable unit to kill with as Lyn. So my verdict, it's a pretty fun map. I would say it's actually one of the best changes in the entire Lyn Hard Mode Mangs Rebalance patch. Just changes the boss inventory. Or, again, take him off the throne. Although, in the original, he was on a throne, so probably to stay more faithful, you would keep him on the throne. Just give him, like, I don't know, a steel sword or something. I don't know. Something like that. Up next, we have Chapter 3. To start out with, let's talk new units. Florina and Will. Florina is about the same as Vanilla, which against stronger enemies means she's even worse. Will, on the other hand, is drastically better. Stronger units means you're going to be able to do a lot more on player phase, which in turn makes archers better in itself. Not to mention bows are just better now with 3 times weapon effectiveness. Not that that particularly matters yet as of this map, but it is worth remembering for later. You will find his buff and strength gives him great chipping capability. Will can get kills easily as well should you choose to, so he can, you know, either kill or set up kills. He's good at both now. Now, for the map. The east side is relatively the same, maybe a few more enemies, and I believe most of the weapons are also the same, or similar, except for one halberd brigand, which you can fight with Lyn or a cav with a sword in a forest. The boss, Miguel, has a hand axe and he moves. While again, not really a fan of the moving boss change, he's so far away from everyone, you shouldn't really be bothered by him moving. What does bother me, however, though, is the west side. You know, the only part where Florina can get to, well, guess what? There's a new brigand in town, and he's got a devil axe, the Mangs trademark. There is also a steel axe brigand. I mention this because Florina is the only one that can, you know, reach this village, as I said before. And that contains 2,000 gold. Now the problem here is that in vanilla, she could easily get to it and be safe. Well, she would probably take a hit, but she would be fine though. She can't now. In fact, it's likely she'll just get murdered. The Devil X guy actually one-shots her at base, which she's gonna be at since this is her first map. This is a major problem since for some weird reason it is also incredibly accurate. You'd think the mountain tile could protect you on your way back. Nope. For some reason, it doesn't even give her the avoid that it should. Unless my game was just glitched. I don't know. Here, watch this clip to show just how utterly bad this unit positioning is. The only way I could get back safely was by a combination of positioning and the Steel X guy that Florina could actually take a hit from, blocked the one tile of the Devil Axe that could hit me from. I'm guessing this is probably what Mangs intended, but it still feels just way too finicky and not really tested, and I think this is just overlooked. I think that even though this isn't required, I think the placement of these enemies is not done well, and overall should be fixed. Overall, this village caused me way too much trouble, at least more trouble than that village is really worth, and I think it brings the map down with it. Too big to be ignored. Not to mention, Florina is even more worthless here. This could be fixed if, say, she had, you know, something like an Axe Reaver. Nope. Just a Slim Lance, though. One that will barely help her. Now, For Chapter 4, you could argue my issues with Chapter 3 are biased for an optional objective, and you may be correct in saying that. However, my issues with Chapter 4 cannot be pushed aside by that. Let's start with the positives. Dorcas is easy to recruit as per usual, and now has hard mode bonuses. And buff base defense. He is the closest to a tank you'll be getting for a while, and man, he is good now. This is great. The rest of the map, however, is not. This map in vanilla I don't believe had but maybe an archer or two. What does this patch do? Just pump them out like a poor country pumps out children. This would be annoying on vanilla, but on this patch it's a headache. Remember how I mentioned archers got buffed? Yep, well, so are enemy archers. Although I think that's also hard mode bonuses. Combine that with the fact that you probably don't have 1-2 range, mainly in the form of javelins, because hand axes I don't even think you can get in Lyn Hard Mode, besides Dorcas. Or at least not at this point in Lyn Hard Mode. And you're not in for a fun time. As a side note, I am well aware that the previous map does have an armory that sells javelins. However, I didn't buy any, as 2,000 gold is not much. Not to mention, in vanilla, you're rewarded actually for saving as much money as possible. So I never spend money in vanilla Lyn Hard Mode. Now, I'm not sure if this has changed in the Mangs edit. It may very well be, because I noticed that the gem you get in Hector Hard Mode is actually changed, like the sort of thing. It seems like it's been reduced, if not taken out, I think. Something like that. But I had no clue, and I just assumed it was like vanilla. So I wanted to avoid spending because of the money reward in the main game that I assumed was going to be there. Maybe Mangs did intend for you to actually buy javelins by now? Possibly. Even so, the odds are you wouldn't be able to do that much damage to them with javelins, as even Kent would probably not double them with a javelin equipped. This is a problem because bows are pretty much the one weapon in GBA FE you can't ever really put at a disadvantage. You have brigands, equip a sword. Soldiers, equip an axe. Archers, well, usually they're weak and easy to kill. Just want to range enemy phase them. This doesn't work here though. Add up their damage and remember it adds up fast. You have vulneraries, but not many. Don't forget you still have no healer either. Overall, this map is just worse than the last map. Like I said, at least the issue with the previous map was that you could just ignore it if you didn't care about the village or money. You can't avoid this archer problem. Too many archers, they keep spawning, and they're too strong put together. All these factors add up to just a terrible time. Difficult, yes, but fun and enjoyable? Absolutely not. Chapter 2 is an example of a fun challenge and a nice change. Chapter 4 is just an example of unfun tedium that comes from not really testing things out and just sort of slapping things on. And I think Chapter 4 is just it's not a good map. Take 4 as an example of what not to do when changing a map. Chapter 5 is thankfully actually a pretty nice break from the madness of the last few maps. For one, you get Urk, who's improved offensively. I've even heard some say he's broken now. Not sure I would say he's necessarily broken, but he definitely is viable, and he's a lot better. A great candidate for chip damage if nothing else. Even better though, we finally get Sarah, a healer. In this patch, this is greatly needed. The enemies aren't too bad here and shouldn't be that big of a problem. Most issue with the generics is that they somewhat surround you now with a Myrmidon to your south. This is okay though, since you have a lot of force to aid you with dodging and just overall cover. Besides that, not much else though. This boss moves and has a halberd. This nearly got me killed. But honestly, I should have expected this by now, so ignoring that minor flaw, pretty fine change. Granted, this map hasn't been changed a ton, but that's alright, especially after the nightmare of Chapter 4. Chapter 6 is not that bad either. Of course, as in vanilla, in this map you get Matthew and Wrath. Wrath is still very solid as always, even better now due to the buff and bows. You can expect him to, be a delete button for most enemies. As for the enemies of this map, there's a few more. The soldiers in the north could be a bit scary due to them having Steel Lance and a Horse Slayer. However, Dorcas should have no trouble dispatching them. You also have quite a few units that can work together to remove them now, so it's not a huge deal. Other than that, most enemies are just more soldiers, so, they just have things like more Steel Lances and one has a Javelin. Still not that threatening though. As for the boss, I'm unsure if he moves or not. Probably not though, since he's guarding a switch. The map again seems pretty easy and nothing really particularly aggravating here. Honestly, I wouldn't mind maybe some even slightly tougher enemies here, but this seems fine. Overall, pretty alright map. Chapter 7 is not really hard, but has an irritating change. So, you get Nils and Lucius. Nils is, of course, Nils. He hasn't really changed. Lucius has gotten a stat buff, so he's pretty much now the Urk of light magic. There is a ton more enemies than in vanilla. I hope you like fighting magic enemies as well, because there are many here. This map isn't really difficult, just kind of tedious with the amount of enemies that can outrange you. However, I do think there should be an honorable mention to the Nosferatu generic, and especially the boss. Heinz having Nosferatu, while being probably the one boss so far actually wish moved, that actually doesn't, makes him unpleasant. This guy is going to camp on his throne dodging you, and then couple that with the fact that Nosferatu is inaccurate but not that inaccurate, it does a massive amount of damage as well. Good luck with this guy. He sucks. Not a bad map change all around, but I would say revert the boss to his usual flux using self. He's an unnecessary slog with Nosferatu, and I'm not really sure why Mangs gave him that, because it just makes him far more annoying. It doesn't really make him harder, it just makes him more annoying. Chapter 7X is of course the Gaiden map. It is a bit harder. The treasure area for one is much better guarded now. Magic users will also do heavy damage, so it makes progress difficult. Besides that though, this boss once again moves. Now he actually does less damage than his mage cronies, but there is a nasty catch to this. He has a poison sword. Now, if you don't know, this probably seems like a joke, but Mangs actually made the poison weapons rather scary now. They eat around 10 HP per turn. So, fortunately, in my case, he didn't hit me. However, I can imagine if he did, it wouldn't be instant trouble, but you would probably want a healer nearby very quickly if a unit gets poisoned. Granted, even if Same got hit by the poison, he'd likely be fine, but still, this could be a problem in maps later if not careful. This map was an alright change. I don't think it's a great change, but I do like the poison gimmick actually feeling threatening for once. Now, as for Chapter 8, there are 2 archers now. I seem to miss that in my first attempt. Don't forget now 2 units can operate that ballista, just rushing to the current ballistician doesn't make this map more convenient. Why Mangs decided there need to be another one when the ballista is just an annoyance that locks your movement for your frailer units, I have no clue. Honestly, I'd keep it the same rather than increase it. Next up is the more major aspect, reinforcements, and tons of them. They only spawn for a few small turns, but it's a ridiculous number per turn. 6 per turn, in fact. 4 of which are actually mounted, some of which even have javelins. And again, your 1-2 range is very limited right now. I should remind you, you don't really have tanks yet either. I guess you could count Dorcas, but there are a lot of reaver weapons here. I just think the reinforcement number is excessive and it hits you as a massive wave. It certainly could be worse if it continued for longer, but the number per turn is obscene. My overall rating was Chapter 8, cool with the reinforcements. So Chapter 9. Chapter 9 is probably the trickiest map in vanilla, and that stays certainly true in the rebalance. Except now it is far worse. So of course, it is a Fog 4 map a few turns into it. This isn't that bad in vanilla. It is far worse here though. Let's start with the positive. You get Wallace, who unlike in vanilla is just over the top and you don't need him. You'll be greatly relieved to see as he can easily wall just about anything and can act as a delete button to any enemy he comes in contact with. This time he starts as a pre-promoted general. However, Wallace can only be in one place at one time. So the crossing to the right side of the map in the north is probably the toughest part. Unfortunately, now it has way more enemies, all sort of congregated near each other, so you're in for quite the fight when you get there. Let's go into the most egregious change though, ambush spawns. In the middle of the map. Yeah, you heard me right. So let's clear something up. In the video I recorded this, I said I thought FE7 has no ambush spawns. Apparently, according to Box.Bandit in the comments, Lyn Mode actually did have ambush spawns in vanilla as well. However, these are particularly nasty ambush spawns for the fact that they are brigands with steel axes. While obviously not the most accurate, you should remember that they hit pretty hard and they spawn right in the narrow path everyone will be crossing. I suppose you could argue that it might be safer to reverse the southern path, and perhaps you're right. However, this is still a nasty surprise for a blind player, such as myself. In fact, I'd argue this is the worst change in all of Lyn Mode. Like, why was it even necessary? All you have to do to make this ambush spawn not be so bad is just to have a predictable spawn point at least, or at the edge of the map or something like that. Guess what though? It's right in the middle of the map. No clue or hint that it'll just appear and try to chop off Nil's head or anything. This is why I hate that so much. It's not because the fact it is an ambush spawn, granted I'd prefer if there weren't any, but if you could at least be slightly fair with your placement. Now, I never had to actually reset for this, but I could have very easily had to, had I just gotten a little unlucky with it. Now here though, what's worse, this probably was intentional as it's not just one stray reinforcement. These guys keep popping up for quite a few turns. Obviously the element of surprise should be gone after the first turn or two, but still trying to get some units like Sarah or Nils is way more dangerous than it ever needed to be. Alternatively, you could make them appear just a few turns later as a pacing mechanism to chase you. The southeast is about the same as usual, and the boss is not really any harder than in vanilla. A good Monikati should send him to the grave. Overall, Chapter 9 is easily the worst map now in the rebalance patch. I already knew I'd hate it, but ambush spawns on a fog of war? Really? We're gonna stoop that low? I mean, that's just ignoring the cluster of northern enemies that are already gonna make it hard to survive just against those guys alone. Sure, you up the difficulty, I'll give you that, but in arguably the most irritating and ridiculous way possible. I'd rather maybe just an enemy or two be promoted instead of all these tricky shenanigans. Finally, Chapter 10. If you've been thinking I've been too negative lately, you'll like my review of Chapter 10. After the worst map of Lyn Hard Mode for this patch, we have the best map. I have almost nothing, in fact, to say but praise of this map. Where do I even begin? Probably with the music. Lyn's final map now has a custom track unique for this map. I should mention he has changed some of the map themes with later tracks like the Elliewood and Hector map themes. This, however, is not even an official track in game. It sounds amazing too. Next up, some of the map changes from vanilla. So this map no longer has its dumb rain gimmick that just slows you down. This alone is improvement enough for me to be happy. Just taking out the weather is enough. But Mangs didn't stop there. He added a shortcut guarded by some enemies. This is a great design choice. You can either go the short but riskier way or the longer but safer route. Brilliant. See, another change I really like, and this is getting a bit more into the enemies, is the fact that there are a few promoted generics on this map. Not a ton, not enough to make this map ridiculously hard, just a few to spice it up. This shortcut leads to a sniper who's moving actually upwards. So the risk there is a sniper can reach you, so there's a little bit more danger that comes with it. Nonetheless, these promoted generics are fun to fight and a great source of EXP. Moving on, this map has learned how to properly do reinforcements. They will spawn at the start a few turns in, and spawn in for another few turns to chase you down. This is how you make reinforcements that aren't just a waste of the player's time and actually serve a purpose. This is what FE games should strive to make reinforcements do. Don't just make them another bag of flesh to throw at the enemy mindlessly. Reinforcements should have very particularly their own unique purpose. Granted, there are also reinforcements near Lundgren that do get a little spammy. However, I can forgive a few since, to be fair, this is the final map. I would say these spammy frontline reinforcements that are near Lundgren are a little bit excessive, but this is the only negative of the map. A map full of overwhelmingly positive changes. It doesn't even really subtract my overall opinion of this map. It's still easily the best map change out of any of the map I've so far played, even in Hector Hard Mode. This map went from being a boring, tedious map in vanilla due to its rain mechanic, but then also being anticlimactic due to the weak enemies, and turned a complete 180 and became a very fitting and appropriate finale for Lyn Hard Mode in this patch. Nice unique music, some promoted enemies, well thought out enemy placement and reinforcements. Very well done map. Mangs really outdid himself here. Excellent job. So that covers Lyn Hard Mode for this patch. I won't deny there are certainly some rough spots and perhaps I'm a little too biased in some of these. I'm sure some of you will disagree with some of my issues. That is fine as well. However, this is personally how I perceive these changes and what I think of them, whether good or bad changes. Or something less extreme that just needs some fine tuning, like the effective weapons in the first few chapters, which I'm kind of surprised and disappointed just sort of ceased later on, when they'd actually be better there in my opinion. Whenever I'm finished with uploading Hector Hard Mode, I'll probably do a review video over those maps as well. So that's gonna be all for now. I'll probably upload daily for Hector Hard Mode since there's more maps. I really want to finish this project before I move off to living in college dorms next month. Anyway, see you guys later.